Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather on this 21st day of February 2020, Friday, and tomorrow, first day of the weekend. But for tonight, until midnight, there's a winter storm warning continues over the Seward Peninsula, particularly near Buckland and Deering. Winds 30 mile an hour, maybe gusts a little higher than that. And that'll create blowing snow conditions that will make for difficult travel till about midnight tonight. And by that time and after, conditions will really be improving quite a bit. Winter weather advisory there for, looks like the Selawik Valley on in toward Kotzebue for same conditions, but not quite as strong on the winds. Visibility is not quite as low as in the warning area there. Otherwise, no watches, warnings, or advisories anywhere else in the state for tonight into tomorrow. And moving to satellite imagery, really more moisture coming northward here. Got southwest flow carrying moisture into the Gulf of Alaska, and actually low pressure tracking northward here over the Kenai Peninsula. Not really showing up that well in this imagery, but it is there. South winds gusting 40, 45 miles an hour, Prince William Sound. Today pushed temperatures in some areas there up into the mid 40s. While just to the west here, winds gusting 50 miles an hour or 50 to 60 miles an hour through the passes of the southern Alaska Range, Kamishak Gap area, Augustine Island, gusts 55 miles an hour out of the west and northwest, and that blowing on into Homer with west-southwest winds there anywhere from 30 to 40 miles an hour in gusts, and creating snow, blowing snow with all the snow that fell overnight and today, as much as 10 or more inches in some areas around the Homer area, and several inches over the Kenai Peninsula. Northern Cook Inlet, about 1 to 2 inches, give or take there. Otherwise, pretty light snowfall amounts elsewhere around the state today. There was, went backwards. Let me go forwards again, or I hit the reset button. Anyway, there was about anywhere from 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch of rainfall with the milder southwest winds here into the Panhandle today, about 1/10 of an inch today at Juneau. So just the big storm earlier on having moved through, and more of a showery condition with rainfall amounts tapering off, but still southwest flow is going to keep showers in the forecast right through the weekend there. Another enhanced area here. Snowfall levels also coming back down to sea level, so most precipitation, except for the outer coastline, central and south coast, probably will be mostly in the form of snow by tomorrow and then into Sunday. Out to the west here, colder temperatures coming in over the Bering Sea, especially out over the western interior. Kotzebue, for example, 25 mile an hour winds and temperature or wind chills at about 40 to 45 below this afternoon. Also Tooksuk Bay seeing gusts anywhere from 30 to 40 miles an hour with temperatures oscillating either side of zero. So much colder air back out here to the west, and the warmer conditions there to the east, all being separated, as we'll see, by low pressure here right over the Kenai Peninsula up toward Cook Inlet. So the cold air behind that, and the northwest winds, milder conditions to the east there. Southwest flow carrying a couple of troughs into the Panhandle. Cloudy variably with isolated snow showers or flurries over the eastern interior, a little more pronounced back to the west here, but still nothing really heavy. Snow, blowing snow through the, as I mentioned, western Alaska Range passes. Kodiak Island winds coming up there. Pilot Point seeing 30 to 40 mile an hour wind gusts, and then something less than that down along the Alaska Peninsula with areas of snow. Bering Sea side of the peninsula, scattered snow showers there on Alaska, as well as the Pribilofs, and snow showers extending out to towards Shemya, where they ended earlier today. And for tonight, this low shifts eastward a little bit, not a whole lot, almost nearly stationary there. And look for gusty winds anywhere from 40, possibly gust 60 miles an hour around Kodiak, and starting to come down there northeast Bristol Bay, but still quite windy through the passes of the western Alaska Range, and still into southern Cook Inlet, coming across the inlet, picking up moisture, snow into Homer tonight, continuing periods of gradually diminishing, and then that south flow or southwest flow here on the east side of the low center. Look for periods of snow on the North Gulf Coast, into the northern Panhandle, still kind of mild enough for rain at sea level over the southern areas, and areas of light snow pretty widespread here over the west central interior, tapering off to showers up that trough axis and over toward the upper Yukon Valley. Some light snow there, but nothing heavy. High pressure beginning to develop here along the southwest coast for clearing skies, which will continue into the first day of the weekend, but also much colder temperatures here coming across the northern Bering Sea behind this system slowly pulling off to the west. Still a good gradient. We still have an upper level low coming across. The upper level trough still oriented something like this. And that's going to keep chance of snow Cook Inlet, snow showers, Susitna Valley. I think Mananuska Valley will be dry. And North Gulf Coast, periods of light snow or snow showers continues tomorrow. Still unsettled for the Panhandle. And some moisture possible anywhere over the central and eastern interior, except for the far eastern areas. Eagle down toward North Wayne-Toke, probably nothing at all. Next system, just starting to increase the winds there over the western central, especially the central Aleutians, but not all that strong. But you're right on the edge of the stronger winds, but doesn't look like it'll do much because this system shifts off to the east-southeast for Sunday as cold high pressure takes over the interior once again. Mostly clear skies and below zero the entire day. Much interior Alaska right out to the Arctic coast. And even overnight lows back below zero, Kenai Peninsula, Susitna Valley, and East Anchorage area. Less in the way of precipitation for the North Gulf Coast. Not much change for the Panhandle. Snow most areas all the way down to sea level. And this area mostly over in Canada by the afternoon. Just some flurries out here along that weak trough over the Bering Sea. Lows tonight anywhere from either side of zero, north of the Alaska Range there up the east side, and then anywhere from 15 to 25 below out to the west and into the teens here, 10 to 15 for Cook Inlet, south central Alaska, mid-20s Prince William Sound, upper 20s, lower 30s for the Panhandle, and down to lower teens for the Pribilof, back below zero St. Lawrence Island, or still below zero there, highs remaining below zero through tomorrow, highs near 20, south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, 35 to 40 for the Panhandle, and near 20 or just under for Kodiak, and below zero everywhere else. And for Sunday morning, anywhere in 25 to 35 below, maybe even somewhere down around 40 below up through this area for Sunday morning with, again, close to zero to 10 below Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, maybe 10 below Copper River Basin, and the Panhandle in the 20s to near 30 south, in the 20s here for the Alaska Peninsula, lower 30s for the Aleutians, mid-20s for the Pribilofs, and followed by highs Sunday afternoon below zero, most areas over the interior north of the Alaska Range, and about 10 degrees over the southwest.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into flying weather. IFR here for Saturday morning, central interior southward into the at least northern half of the Kuskokwim Valley, across the western Alaska Range, into Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, into the northern Panhandle, marginal to the south, marginal for the Gulf, and marginal VFR either side of that zone, but we got some VFR breaking out here, Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, down along the southwest coast. Not too bad out over the Bering Sea, areas of VFR along with some marginal conditions, and some IFR just creeping up to the Amchitka Island area. For the afternoon, that shifts on into ADAC, not quite to ATCA, but you'll be marginal. Zone of VFR here between that area and a narrow band of marginal VFR along the southwest coast, down to the Alaska Peninsula. Other area of, looks like VFR here, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, on up the west side to the western Arctic coast, IFR, Central Brooks Range, eastward to the border, northward to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Another zone of IFR here, or the same one actually, from say possibly the Talkeetnas, Turnagain Arm. I don't think the Mananuska Valley. I think Mananuska Valley will be basically VFR tomorrow afternoon. North Gulf Coast, so IFR. Panhandle, marginal VFR with an area of IFR there along the south coast. And then for Sunday morning, pretty good VFR here, western interior into the Bering Sea, and then a narrow band of marginal conditions, Pribilofs down to False Pass there, and possibly in Alaska. Marginal by the time you get to ATCA becomes possible IFR for ADAC, and otherwise the Bering Sea not too bad, and the Gulf of Alaska marginal. Zone of IFR here right along, say from Port Alexander on up to Sitka, Mount Edgecombe, right along the coastline, otherwise marginal, with some VFR over the southern southeast coast. In the afternoon, that area becomes IFR from VFR. And pretty good, interior Alaska, mostly VFR. Eastern Bering Sea, same thing. Band of marginal conditions from Nome, White Mountain, Teller down to St. Lawrence Island, but Pribilofs, VFR. And Adak and Atka, mostly VFR, with IFR farther to the west. And for passes tomorrow, Anatuvik and Adigan, both marginal VFR, trending toward IFR into the afternoon. And Lake Clark and Merrill reverse that trend, starting out with the lowest conditions in the morning, trending toward improvement in the afternoon to hopefully marginal VFR. And same trend for rainy, IFR becomes marginal. Windy, same trend also, starting out IFR, better conditions into the latter part of the day. Isabel occasionally marginal. Mentasta, VFR the entire day Saturday. Tanita, optimistically, VFR, be some clouds around, but should be above marginal conditions, marginal thresholds. Portage, improving. I think it'll probably could start out low IFR and then improve to IFR conditions, maybe marginal with some luck. And for Chilkoot and White, IFR becoming marginal. Freezing levels, not much to look at here at the surface, up to about Yakutat, on down to the southeast there, 2,000 feet way down to the south. They're barely even on the map. Off the map out here to the west, but at the surface just north of the central and western Aleutians, south of the Pribilofs. Icing shaping up like this. Frontal system pushing, increasing threats of icing into the western Aleutians, possibly as far east as Adak. And up here over the northern interior, another zone of areas of mixed icing, possibly scattering out along the Alaska Range. Then a more solid zone here for the North Gulf Coast from Prince William Sound on down the southeast coast, tapering off there toward the south. And then upper level wind flow chart, jet stream, strongest flow well to the south of the state. Got some ridging here out over the eastern Aleutians as this trough slowly moves through the area. Kind of another cutoff low here right over Kenai Peninsula tomorrow. The main low back to the northwest, 9,000 feet. Northwest 35 to 40 across Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island. And coming back around 20 to 25 knots from the southeast and 25 to 30 into the Panhandle. And for 3,000 feet, 30-knot winds just barely come up the western Aleutians with that feature, ridging to the east. This low, 20 to 35-knot winds out of the northwest there for the Kodiak Island area. That translates into some occasional moderate chop right along and just east of the western Alaska Range to Kodiak Island, possibly the Aleutians.
When you think of a national park, you probably envision wide open natural spaces, undisturbed by human activity. There are indeed such places, but even in some of the most remote areas of a place like Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska, the mark of man is present. Marine debris is a menace to the farthest reaches of our globe, and even designated national park lands are not immune. In the summer of 2009, the Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance, a grassroots conservation organization based in Seward, Alaska, decided to do something about the marine debris fouling the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park. Marine debris coordinator Tim Johnson had first-hand experience with the issue.
The summer before, my wife and I, Michelle, had done a paddle from Seward, sea kayak paddle from Seward to Homer. Really, our eyes were open to some areas that we didn't realize there was so much accumulation. It was very deceiving up front. You couldn't really get a feel for the extent and impact of it. You've got this nice high tide line that's quite pristine, and you really don't get a picture for the impact and the amount of debris in that area until you get behind those storm berms. You get back into the lagoons and the vegetation around those lagoons. And then you see the absolute extent back into that veg and how intertwined and enmeshed these decades of trash deposition. So we were just appalled by that and said we got to get something together on a larger scale.
The Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance is a local nonprofit community organization, and they have been instrumental in helping the Park Service obtain funding to get larger boats to help move the debris, and they get volunteer labor and organize the work trips. And so it's really a partnership between the Park Service and the community to help get out and really get a project done that in and of itself any one group couldn't do on their own.
Most of that trash was baggable. However, there were large items, huge, piles of hauser line, for example, that we just had to hoist up onto the boat.
The volunteers didn't just bag, haul, and hoist the garbage, but also carefully recorded what types of debris were collected.
In many ways, the debris itself is a resource. Archaeologists use middens, the trash heaps, as a way of analyzing past cultures, and in one sense marine debris is a form of a midden. It's a trash heap that left for the future would be something that people could use to analyze our culture. It may not say the best things about our culture or everything that we want, but we need to be able to document what we've done so that we can preserve that legacy, make sure that we as a society don't forget what we've been doing.
We had two larger categories of marine debris that we picked up. Commercial fishing means like, say, gill nets, large hauser lines, anything that would be associated with more of a commercial fishing scale. And then the second category was more recreational fishing and household, which would be general plastics, things like that. So we had about a 75% of the commercial fishing marine debris element, and about 25% of the recreational and household further out the bay. And we had the exact opposite the closer we got to Seward. Within the bay, it was about 25% commercial fishing versus 75% recreational fishing and household.
The trash is not just unsightly for park visitors, but also poses threats to wildlife and marine habitat.
Really one of the larger issues now that you go to this plastic that can really get into the food web and affect the food web differently than something like glass.
These substances, for instance, all these polystyrene blocks that are breaking down into all these little crumbly bits are further breaking down on a microscopic level, and how much of an impact that has, in this ecosystem is yet to be determined, but I think it's got pretty high potential.
Well known that sea turtles will eat plastic bags floating in the water. They look like jellyfish to a sea turtle, and obviously a plastic bag doesn't go well in the digestive system of a turtle. Albatross will see small pieces of plastic floating on the surface and think they're small fish and other food sources and eat that in their stomachs, especially in some of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. They'll find dead albatross that have starved to death with a full stomach, and it's full of pieces of plastic.
we're affecting our local areas this way, but we need to be thinking about it from more of a state and a global, international scale. And most importantly, to try and focus on prevention of it coming in the first place. Because we're just going to see this continuing, to build up on our beaches unless we're able to get a little bit more of an approach on prevention on the front end.
Marine debris is really a global problem, in all the oceans, and there are many different sources. Global shipping is one. Fishing debris from commercial fishing, recreational boating activity on land, stuff blowing off land, washing down streams, people just throwing stuff on the shore.
Though the problem can seem overwhelming, Johnson remains upbeat about making a positive difference.
No, you gotta start locally. You gotta take control of what you can do, and make something with that, and try and move on from there.
Overall, more than 9 tons of debris was removed from the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park and transported back to Seward to be deposited in a landfill.
People gave a lot to the project in order to make it happen. That was awesome. One of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. Being able to put that large of a group of volunteers together, dedicated volunteers to put that much effort and give that much time and pull all the different agencies together to see it all happen was incredible. It was incredible. Yeah, very fulfilling experience.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis, not a lot different from yesterday here. Still north of St. Paul, south of St. Matthew Island, and a fair amount of ice up over northern northeast Bristol Bay. From there, we'll take a look at coastal water forecast. South coast of the Panhandle tomorrow, south to southwest, 20-25 knots, seas 16 to 18 feet or so. Southwest 20 on the north coast, seas a little less, around 15 feet. And all the inside waters, especially Clarence Strait, Stevens Passage, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, all out of the south tomorrow, give or take, with seas around 3 feet, except up to 7 feet for Clarence Strait. And for Sunday, we've got northwest 15 there for the Strait, with seas not too bad, 2 feet. Same thing for Stevens Passage, southwest at 10 with seas at 2 feet. North 20 now for Lynn Canal, seas 4 feet. Small craft advisories on the south coast. 25 knot winds out of the west, 12 to 14 foot seas, and conditions wind-wise lightening up as you head up the coastline, with seas also coming down to about 10 feet. And for Prince William Sound, light south winds tomorrow, especially compared to today, at 10 knots with 2 foot seas. Southwest 20 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast, western North Gulf Coast. Small craft advisories west 25 knots, and full gales for the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, west 40 to 45 knots. Seas in the bay here possibly as high as 20 feet. Otherwise, southern Cook Inlet, northwest at 20. Swinging around the variable to east for northern Cook Inlet at 10 knots. And the outlook for Sunday, northerlies 10 to 15 for Cook Inlet. Seas not too bad, 4 feet or less for southern Cook Inlet. Northwest 40, still gales coming out of Kamishak Bay, out of the northwest now, blowing right down across the Barren Islands, but coming down to 35 knots there. North 25, western North Gulf Coast, 7 foot seas. And north at 20 there over toward Middleton Island. Prince William Sound coming up, northwest 25. Higher gusts out of northern western bays, especially like Passage Canal, seas at 3 feet. And for Kodiak tomorrow, gale warnings west 35 knots and northwest 30 knots there, Sitkinak to Castle Cape, and Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev here, Pacific side of the peninsula, northwest at 25, north 15 on the Bering Sea side, and then small craft advisories for Bristol Bay, northwest 25 knots, seas 4 feet. Those will drop off and turn northeast, come down to 15 knots on the day Sunday there. But winds turning east, increasing here, especially south of the Alaska Peninsula, coming up to gale force, east 35, Sunday and Sunday afternoon, seas 11 feet, and 25 knot winds on the Bering Sea side. Kodiak Island, northwest 30-35 knots with the gales in Shelikof Strait. And for the Fox Island, or for the western Aleutians, start out there northeast 25, seas 11 feet. And then Adak and Atka, southeast 25 to 30 knots with seas 6 to 10 feet. And getting over toward the Fox Islands there. In fact, both Unmak and Unalaska Island, especially Unalaska Island, south to southeast 15 knots. And then for Sunday, coming up, 30 to 40 knot winds there for the eastern Aleutians. Adak and Atka, east 20 to 30 knots, strongest Pacific side of the island, 17-foot seas, and then easterlies of 20 knots for the remainder of the Aleutian chain out to Shemya. Southwest coast, 15-knot winds, kind of a variable direction, south of Nunivak Island, southwest 15. That extends all the way back to the Pribilofs, southeast 25 here for St. Matthew Island, and northwest 25, Yukon Delta, or northwest 15 for the Yukon Delta coast, southwest 10 to 15, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island. And for Sunday, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, southerlies at 15 knots, 20-knot winds, Yukon Delta coast, as well as St. Matthew Island. Southeast 15 for the Kuskokwim Delta coastline, and 20 knots for the Pribilofs with 6-foot seas. And for the central eastern Beaufort Sea, variable winds, 10 knots, southwest 15 here for the west side all the way down to Cape Thompson to Wales, southerlies at 15. And for Sunday, Wales up to Cape Beaufort, south winds, 20 knots. Western Central Arctic coast, south at 15, and then 15 increasing to 20 knots over toward demarcation point out of the west on Sunday. And for tonight, not too bad wind-wise up there this evening, but snow, gusty winds, and winter storm warning and advisories ending there for the Seward Peninsula. The worst conditions this evening for Buckland and Deering. Otherwise, snow blowing snow through the passes, gusty winds, gale force winds, Kodiak Island, and periods of light snow south central Alaska along the North Gulf Coast. Snowfall levels coming down over the Panhandle tonight, but drier conditions out to the west. And it looks like for Sunday, colder and drier, but still snow showers over the Panhandle.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.